welcome to Polly Psychology. I hope you all are doing good. So, joining you all after a long time, and before making this video, I had asked you all in my community post that you'll want the Robert Barron series in Hindi or English, because whenever I'm making a video in Hindi, some people are commenting that, ma'am, please do it in English, and when I make videos in English, people write that please make it in Hindi. So I had just asked you all, and people voted there. It was a poll, and it came out to be like, 50-50 for Hindi and 50% votes for English. So I just thought that it would be better if I take up the course in English so that many of you can understand and will be comfortable. So we'll be studying the Robert Barron book in English, and whenever you feel like you're having a doubt, just feel free to write down in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer them. And feel free to ask me any type of your questions and doubts. I'll try to answer them. So before starting this video, I would like to request you all to please hit that subscribe button below, because it gives me inspiration to make videos for you all. And I do put in a lot of hard work to make all the notes and videos, so I hope that when you are watching this, you will also feel the same, that yes, if you're gaining something out of my videos, then please hit the subscribe button below, like this video, and share it among your friends. So let's start. Earlier we had started in the Robert Barron series. We have already completed the first chapter, and now we are continuing the second chapter. So we have already started the second chapter as well, and this is going to be the further topics of the second chapter. So the first topic for this video is the cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex, the core of complex thoughts. So what do I mean when I say the cerebral cortex? I'm talking about the brain. I'm talking about the human brain. And that cerebral cortex is said to be the core of complex thought. Now, this means that all the types of complex thoughts that takes place in our mind, in our brain, that happens in this cerebral cortex. It takes place in the cerebral cortex. All the information processing things like reasoning, problem solving, understanding the language, planning, all these things happen inside our cerebral cortex. So here it has been given that the outer covering of the cerebral hemisphere is known as the cerebral cortex, which we can see. It is like, the part of the brain that is responsible for our ability to reason, plan, remember, imagine, all these things which we like sit and do inside our mind. It is done in this cerebral cortex. And even if you take out the picture of the human brain, you will be able to notice that the color of the cortex is quite grayish. It's quite brownish gray. So it is also known as the gray matter. And why the color is like brownish gray? Because of the predominance of the cell bodies that provides a brownish gray color to the cortex. So the cell bodies which makes up the cerebral cortex, the cell bodies, I mean the neurons I'm talking about, the neurons are there, and the cell body of the neurons, they make up the cortex grayish in color. So there are lots and lots of the cell bodies predominated in that region of the brain, and that provides a brownish gray color to the cortex. Below the cortex is the myelin sheath axon, that is known by the name of white matter. So it gives an opaque appearance, and because it is myelin sheath, so I told you that neuron is there. You know how the structure of a neuron looks. So the cell body is predominated in the cortex region. Now below it will come the axons. So the axons are myelin sheath, and that's why they appear white in color. It is known as white matter, but they appear opaque. The appearance is quite opaque. I mean, the light cannot pass through it. It's like opaque in its appearance. So what does this myelin sheath axon they do? They connect the neurons of the cortex to other parts of the brain. So when we saw the brain, we are seeing like from outside, we are seeing the brain's cortex is visible to us. There is the cerebral cortex, and below the cerebral cortex, it is the white matter. First comes the gray matter, which is predominated by the cell bodies of the neurons, and below that is the myelin sheath axon, which forms the white matter. Now, these neurons, they connect these type of neurons of the cortex to other parts of the brain, so they are responsible for these. Now, cerebral hemispheres are folded into many ridges and grooves. So when you see the cortex in a picture, you will find there are a lots of ridges and grooves and folded structures are present, so that is known by the name of ridges and grooves. Now, the cerebral cortex is divided into two halves. One is the left cerebral hemisphere, and next is the right cerebral hemisphere. So, one is left, another one is right cerebral hemisphere. So, these are two equal symmetrical halves of the brain or of the cerebral cortex. Next, we'll look at the different distinct regions, or the four distinct regions or lobes of the cerebral cortex. Now, what are they? First is the frontal lobe, next parietal lobe, third is the occipital lobe, and fourth is the temporal lobe. So first we'll look at the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe occupies the area of the brain which is nearest to the face, and it is bounded by the deep central fissure that is known as the central fissure. So that I have underlined, you also make a note of it, that it is bounded by the deep central fissure, you can see. And here is the motor cortex. What is motor cortex? Motor cortex is the area which is concerned with the control of body movements. Like motor, when you hear motor movements, just remember that it means that something related to the movement of your hands and also the movement of the body. So here the motor cortex is the area which is concerned with the control of the body movements. Now, what happens when any damage occurs to this motor cortex? It implies that when the damage occurs in this area, there is a loss of control over fine movements. Fine movements means like the movements of your fingers. It is like it doesn't have any control. So there is loss of control over fine movements like fingers. And also we can note that when such a damage happens or occurs to this particular region of the brain, in the frontal lobe, in the motor cortex, there is of course the damage happens and it affects your control over fine movement, but it does not produce total paralysis. So it is not producing total paralysis, and that is to be noted. And there are specific areas of the brain that may perform a given function, but other regions can take up the slack if that area is damaged. So this explains the plasticity, about the plasticity of our brain. Like now I told you that there is motor cortex inside the frontal lobe. In the frontal lobe, the region which is responsible for the control over fine body movements is present. Now, if that area is damaged, what will happen? You will not have control over fine movements of your body. The term fine has been used and the example has been given, like the control over the movement of your fingers. Now, it is also mentioned that if damage is occurring, it will not produce total paralysis of the body. Like you will be able to move, even though the region is responsible for your motor movements, but you will be able to move. And that is because the other regions of the brain or the other parts of the brains are helping it. They are in association with each other and they help each other to coordinate the bodily actions and movements in a correct manner. So when this thing is happening, like specific area of the brain, they may be responsible for a given function, but when that part is damaged, some other parts they help in it, and not entire total damages felt by the individual. So this is known as the plasticity, and plasticity is greater at young age, but as you grow, when the body is matured, it will also, like, it will serve throughout your lifetime, but when you are young, plasticity is more. Next is the parietal lobe. Parietal lobe is located across the central fissure from the frontal lobe. Like I explained, the frontal lobe, in the frontal lobe, we just saw that it is bounded by the deep central fissure. Entirely where the central fissure is seen, there is the frontal lobe. Parietal lobe is located across the central fissure from the frontal lobe. Now, this area contains the somatosensory cortex. What is somatosensory cortex? It is the region where the information from the skin senses the touch, temperature, pressure. Like you feel all these things because the somatosensory cortex is present in your parietal lobe region of the cerebral cortex of your brain. So I hope that it is clear. Our brain comprises of the cerebral cortex, and cerebral cortex has four distinct regions, and among those four distinct regions, parietal lobe is the region or area where this area of somatosensory cortex is present, responsible for the skin senses which we feel. Now, damage to this area, it can produce a variety of effects which depends on whether the injury occurs on the right or left side of the cerebral hemisphere. I'm talking about the parietal lobe, so you need to note this thing that earlier I said our brain is divided into two equal hemispheres, which we call as the cerebral hemispheres. So it is like the left hemisphere and other is the right hemisphere. So here we are talking about the parietal lobe, and if damage is occurring in this area, it will depend the effect of the damage which will be produced will depend on the side of the injury. So if it's happening on the right side, something will happen, and if it's happening on the left side, some other thing will happen. So let's see. Now, if there is injury on the on the left side, then the loss of the ability to read, write is there, or difficulty in knowing where the parts of their body are located. So what is happening when the left side of the parietal lobe is being injured? The person will lose the ability to read and write. The person will not be able to read, he or she will not be able to write, and they will have a difficulty in knowing where the parts of their body are located. Supposing someone will say that, where is your leg? They will not be able to locate it because something has happened. They have suffered injury, so they'll not be able to locate and they'll not be able to respond. So that happens when the left side is injured. Now, right side injury, the person may be unaware of the left side of the body. Now, what does that mean? It means that when the right side of the parietal lobe is injured in any person, is damaged in any individual, the person will have a difficulty in knowing or in consciously being aware of the left side of his body. So example in the book has been given: a man may forget to shave his left side of the face. Third is the occipital lobe. It is located near the back of the head. The region of the location is back of the head, near the back of the head, and the primary function of the occipital lobe is in the form of visual. It contains a sensory area which receives the input from the eyes, and now after the eyes receives the input, we like process, our brain processes, and we are able to make out that what this stimulus is all about, and hence the response occurs. So occipital lobe is all about our visual sensory area. The damage, now when damage occurs to this area, it produces a hole in the person's vision field. Now, what happens when this hole is produced? Objects in particular location cannot be seen, but the rest of the area is quite evident. The person is able to recognize the surrounding areas, but particular objects they cannot locate. That happens when a person is suffering from a damage in this area, producing a hole in the person's vision field. Damage in the right hemisphere of the occipital lobe, it produces the effect of loss of vision in the left visual field, and damage in the left hemisphere, it produces the effect of loss of vision in the right visual field. So it is like opposite. When the damage is occurring in the right hemisphere, the person will have a difficulty in his left visual field, like they'll not be able to see things in the left visual field, and vice versa. Last is the temporal lobe. It is located along the left side, along the side of each hemisphere. contains a sensory area which receive input from the ears. So temporal is all about hearing. Like I said, occipital is all about the visual sensory input. Temporal is all about a hearing. So it contains a sensory area which receive input from the ears, and it plays a key role in hearing. When damage occurs, when the damage is in the left hemisphere, there is the loss of ability to understand spoken words. When people are saying something, the person will not be able to understand what has been said. And if the damage is occurring in the right hemisphere, the person will be able to recognize speech, but they may lose the ability to recognize other organization of sound. For example, melodies and tones and rhythms, they'll not be able to understand all these things. So in our brain, the motor cortex and the sensory cortex, they just make up only 20 to 25% of the cortex. Remainder areas of the brain, they make up the association cortex. And what this association cortex is all about, it integrates several activities, and it integrates several activities through our brain and for our brain, in order to coordinate in a better manner, coordination of the entire body. And it is also involved in complex cognitive activities. Next topic is two minds in one body, our divided brains. So why did I say this? Now, as we read that there are two hemispheres of our brain, and they appear to be like mirror images of one another. Like I said, if in our occipital lobe, when the damage is occurring in the right hemisphere, the person is experiencing the loss of vision in his left visual field. And if the person is if the damage is occurring in the left hemisphere, the person will have to experience the loss of vision in his right visual field. So what does it display? It shows that the brain appear to be mirror images of one another, the two hemispheres of the brain. Now, for that reason, we will now look at two things, two important terms: lateralization of function. Lateralization of function. What is lateralization of function? It means that specialization of the two hemispheres of the brain for the performance of different functions. Each specializes to an extent in the performance for somewhat different tasks. So there are two hemispheres of our brain. Both of them, they specialize in some or the other different task, but both, they are like mirror images of each other. In general terms, the left hemisphere is the verbal hemisphere, like it is specialized for speech and other verbal tasks. In contrast, the right specializes in the control of certain motor movements, in synthesis and in comprehension and communication of emotion. So this was about the two hemispheres of the brain. Evidence from two kinds of research points to these conclusions: that studies of persons whose cerebral hemispheres have been isolated from each other through like either accident, surgery performed for medical reasons, and studies of the rest of the persons in whom the two cerebral hemispheres are connected in the normal way. So as I said that, as we study in psychology, that psychology is very much like a science. We don't like assume things, we don't make predictions, we actually study, we apply the research methods, and when we are sure and we are very much in possession with the examples, real life examples, and with the proofs, only then we conclude something. So here also it has been noted that we have done experiments, the psychologists, they have done experiments, and through those experiments we have come to know, we have come to this point that left brain specializes in the verbal task, and the right hemisphere of the brain is in control of certain motor movements. So these all has been derived from special experiments. So lateralization of function means the specialization of the two hemispheres of the brain for the performance of different functions. Next is the corpus callosum. What is corpus callosum? I hope that most of you might be knowing, but the ones who don't know, let me tell you, it is a band of nerve fibers connecting the two hemispheres of the brain. So as I said that the brain is divided into two equal halves. Between the two equal halves lies the corpus callosum, and it is a band of nerve fibers. Remember, the corpus callosum is made of nerve fibers and it connects the two hemispheres of the brain. So as we read that the two hemispheres are specialized for different functions, and all these we can tell only by applying the research methods like PET scanning, EEG, CT, MRI, squid, etc. There are lots of research methods and research techniques using which scientists have arrived at this conclusion, and you can very well look at the book and you can read, you can go through it in detail, and you will be able to know that how we know about all these things, like this part of the brain is specialized in this function and the other part is in some other. So that has been given in detail in your book, you can go through it. Now let us move to the next topic, the brain and human behavior, where biology and consciousness meet. You might be aware of the fact that our human brain is always compared with that of the processing unit of a computer. Okay, so there is always this comparison of human brain with computer in terms of processing information. I would like to let you know that the modern computers, they are serial devices while our brains appear to process information in a parallel fashion. Now what do I mean by this? Human beings, their brain, it functions in a parallel fashion containing many modules, and these modules, they are made up of collection of interconnected neurons that process information in different ways simultaneously. So this is the area where the computer's processing unit and the human brain differs, where the computers are serial devices while our human brains, they can process information simultaneously because of the presence of interconnected neurons, and they are connected, they work together in order to process the information in different ways, and that function happens simultaneously. So let us look at serial versus parallel processing. In serial processing, for example, we take a complex task, and that example could be like identifying an object. In serial processing, what will happen? In step 1, you will notice the shape. In step 2, you will try to find the location. In step 3, the color. So this happens in a very orderly fashion, like one after another, like step 1, step 2, and step 3. This processing occurs one step at a time, and hence it is known as the serial processing. In parallel processing, the complex task example is same, like identifying an object. What will happen is that tasks are divided in parts, like part 1 will identify the shape, next is the location, third is the color. So here in parallel processing, the processing occurs simultaneously in different modules and in different parts of the brain. So it is happening simultaneously in different parts of the brain. So that's why it is in a parallel fashion. Next is the brain and human speech. When talking about the brain and human speech, Broca's area is a very important region. Why? Because it is a region in the prefrontal cortex that plays a role in the production of speech. So remember, where is the location of the Broca's area? It is a region in the prefrontal cortex, and it plays a major role in the production of speech. That's why we are reading about this Broca's area. What happens when there is a damage in it? It disrupts the ability to speak, producing a condition known as Broca's aphasia. So when the Broca's area is damaged in any person, that person will suffer from Broca's aphasia. It contains of a number of symptoms like the ability to speak is lost, and that's why the condition is Broca's aphasia. So what happens exactly? People, they produce slow laborious speech that's agrammatical in nature. Like when people will speak, such kind of people whose Broca's area has been damaged, they'll be very slow and they'll give a laborious speech where the sentences, the words are not grammatical in nature. they are not grammatically correct, and there is an inability to find a proper word for which they want to express, even if they find there is difficulty in pronunciation. So that's why the first two words has been used. Like, the speech of such kind of people, it becomes very slow and laborious, because they'll be keep on thinking about the right word for which they want to, they want to use in their conversation. They want to say something, but then they'll not be able to find that word, and even if they find it, even if they are able to say it, they'll not be able to pronounce it correctly. So that happens in this case. And what it implies, this implies that this and the surrounding portions of the brain, they contain memories of the sequences of muscular movements in the mouth and tongue that produce words. So I said that even if there is Broca's aphasia in a person, even if the person is not able to remember a certain word, after some time that person may remember that word to use, but they are not able to pronounce it correctly. So here it shows that the surrounding portions of the brain, this Broca's area and the surrounding portions of that part of the brain, they contain memories of the sequence of the muscular movements in the mouth and tongue that produce the words. When the Broca's area is damaged, the ability to produce coherent speech is impaired. That's why people are not able to say something correctly, and their speech becomes slow and laborious. Next is the Vernix area. It is an area in the temporal lobe that, through its connection with other brain areas, plays a role in the comprehension of speech. Broca's area is responsible for production of speech, like when I'm saying something, Broca's area is responsible for it. But Vernix area is the area which works while you are comprehending something. You are like you are doing the comprehension of speech. You're trying to understand what the person is saying, what you are saying. You're comprehending things. So damage involves three major symptoms. First is the inability to recognize spoken words. Second is inability to understand the meaning of these words, and third is the inability to convert thoughts into words. So when you're having something in your mind, you're not able to express it through words. So all these things are happening because the comprehension of speech is involved in three of these symptoms. You're not able to recognize the spoken words. You're not understanding what is being spoken to you. Second is understanding the meaning of these words. First, you couldn't recognize the word. Second, even if you could recognize the word, the sound, you're not able to recognize the meaning. And third is that even if you're having something in your mind, you're not able to express it into words. So when these symptoms happen, it is known as the Vernix aphasia. So if Vernix area alone is damaged, pure word deafness occurs. Pure word deafness. If an area behind the Vernix area is damaged, persons can repeat the words they hear, but they have no understanding of this meaning, of their meaning. So when the damage is occurring at the back side or behind the Vernix area, people, they will repeat the word, what they have heard, but they will not be able to understand the meaning. Comprehension of speech involves a flow of information from the Vernix area to the posterior language area, and then to the sensory association areas and back again. And that's how you process the things, you speak, you understand, and you comprehend, and then your task is done. That is how you function. So speech production involves the flow of information from sensory association areas to the posterior language area, and then back to the Broca's area. So that's all for this video. I hope you all like it, and there are a couple of topics left from this chapter, and we'll soon finish this chapter. So I hope that you go through the book as well, because in order to understand and in order to retain what you saw, what you read right now, it is very important to go through the book. You just inculcate the habit of reading in you among yourselves, so that it will be very easier for you to understand any type of topics. Now, if you are having that book in the PDF form, if you're having the Robert Barron book in your PDF form or in your hard copy form, I would like to tell you that please go through the book, and whenever you're finding any doubt, you're coming across a doubt, or any question comes to your mind, you can feel free to comment below. And you can also DM me on my Instagram at the rate polypsychology. And I hope that it's gonna help you, all these videos, and you're gonna subscribe to my channel, and you will definitely share it among your friends. I hope you all are having a good study time. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you don't forget to like this video and share it among your friends.